What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Muse podcast. We are on day 20 of 32 teams in 32 days. We've already wrapped up the entire AFC. We are finishing up the NFC East with the G Man, New York Giants. If you are not familiar with my previews, one, I'd recommend you go back and watch some of the previews. But to give you a quick overlook, is we talk about additions and re-signings, strengths, weaknesses, departures, draft picks, some question marks as far as the team goes, and we give an overall prediction for how we think the team's going to do in the 2021 season. So, last year on this very podcast, I predicted the New York Giants to go 8-8. They end up going 6-10, and there's a few reasons that kind of came to be their final record. I think one of them is Daniel Jones again kind of underperformed. And we're really going to deep dive into Daniel Jones and what his future looks like and what the future of the New York Giants looks like with Daniel Jones at the helm. We'll start with additions and re-signings. So as far as additions and re-signings, they get Devontae Booker, Corey Clement, Kenny Galladay, John Ross, Kelvin Benjamin, Kyle Rudolph, Zach Fulton, Ryan Anderson, Leonard Williams, Danny Shelton, Reggie Ragland, and Adoree Jackson. I like some of those guys, man. I'm a big Kenny Galladay fan. I think he's the best parts of Alshon Jeffrey when he was in his prime, and I think that he's probably, I don't know, maybe like a poor man's Allen Robinson. So I mean, and I think Allen Robinson's a borderline top 5 receiver. I think Kenny Galladay is probably a top 12 guy in the league. So I do like Kenny Galladay. I like the idea of bringing in a Kyle Rudolph. He's very efficient around the goal line, very good blocker. Hopefully, he kind of gets Evan Ingram to get things right. Kelvin Benjamin has been working out as a tight end, which is kind of interesting. I like taking the fly route on John Ross. I mean, the dude can flat out fly. Hasn't been very efficient in the NFL. He's had a few huge games, but as a whole, hasn't been super efficient. So why not take the fly route on him? You get guys like a Devontae Booker and a Corey Clement to kind of help maybe, just take a few reps off of Saquon Barkley's plate as he comes back from the knee injury. I love the Danny Shelton pick, and I'm going to talk about their defensive line in a little bit. Adoree Jackson's a guy I think's kind of underperformed in his career so far, and I think he's been solid and almost more than underperformed is been kind of inconsistent because he's had some moments where he's looked very, very good, and you understand why he was a first round pick. And then he's had other moments where he looks kind of lost and kind of outmatched. So it's going to be interesting. But I like the guys they got so far. As far as departures go, they lose Dion Lewis, Devontae Freeman, Golden Tate, Kevin Zeitler, Cam Fleming, Dalvin Tomlinson, Kyler Fackrell, David Mayo, and Jabal Sheard. I think the pros outweigh the cons here. Kevin Zeitler is a loss. Golden Tate, they lose him, but I think it's definitely a big upgrade to get a Kenny Galladay. Because I think Golden Tate is a very solid complementary piece. But when you look at Kenny Galladay, I think he has all the ability in the world to be a true number one, and I think that's what this team is kind of searching for and kind of looking for. Somebody to kind of set the tone to be that guy. When we jump to their draft picks in the first round, they get a guy who I really like. He's not super polished, but with the guys in front of him, I think he's gonna have an idea of how to learn. Gives him a little bit of space not to be the guy right away, and that's Kadarius Toney, wide receiver from Florida. He puts you in the mind of like a Deebo Samuel, who's had great success in San Francisco when he's been healthy. The guy isn't a burner necessarily. He's not necessarily super twitchy, not super, big guy, but he just runs hard, man. He's the guy that can take a bubble screen and break 6 tackles and take it 80 yards. And he can do that on any route with any catch. So I really do like Kadarius Toney. Like I said, he's not super polished yet, but I think, when you look at him, early on, you kind of see a Deebo Samuel, but I think he can turn into something, pretty efficient, working out of that slot. You can play him out wide here and there, but I think he kind of fits in pretty well with this team. In the second round, they get Aziz, and I'm sorry if I butcher his last name, Ojulari, which is an edge rusher from Georgia. Really like him, little undersized, but he's a boomer bust prospect, kind of a classic edge rusher in that aspect where I wouldn't be surprised he's a 12 sack a year kind of guy for 5 to 6 years. I wouldn't be surprised if he's out of the league in 5 or 6 years. He has spots in tape where you're like, wow, this dude could be special. And then he has spots in tape where you're like, wow, I forgot this guy was on the field. So that's an interesting one because if he kind of comes on, not only just this year, but in the future, it's definitely a huge plus to grab him in the second round. And a few other guys they got in the draft is Aaron Robinson and Ellerson Smith. So when we talk about team strengths, I look at this team and it's much of how I felt last year. When I look at this team, I'm not saying they're perfect, but there's no glaring weaknesses to me. There's nowhere that I look on this team and I'm like, man, that's like they're going to get hurt there. At that same point, they don't have any strong strengths. A spot where I'm like, man, like that's one of the best top 5 position groups in the league. So this team is very, I don't want to say average, but I think this team, if they get a few guys to kind of play above their pay grade, play above the what we think. I think that's what takes you to a double-digit win team. But if the guys just play what they're capable of, I predicted 8-8 last year. It could be something pretty similar this year. When I go to weaknesses, like I said, I like the roster from top to bottom, but I'm going to kind of combine my biggest question mark and my biggest weakness. And it's Daniel Jones. I just don't love him. He's inconsistent. Again, he's a guy who will what was it, a Thursday night game? He ripped off a huge run. He shows athleticism, but he's also the same guy that just fumbles the ball way too much, throws too many picks, too many just kind of those passes where you're like, where was he going with that, or what was he seeing? He just has too many plays like that to be this point in his career. You're kind of hoping the good outweighs the bad, and maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the year that he steps forward and kind of takes that next little baby leap. If he does, that's great for this team. And he has the guys around him. When you talk about, Slayton and Galladay and Tony, Evan Ingram, those guys, I mean, Saquon Barkley, you have those guys that kind of take some of the pressure off of them, and hopefully that works. But we can't really guarantee it. One thing I wish the Giants would have done is to bring in somebody to really push him, because sometimes competition will either make you or break you. And I don't think Mike Glennon's that guy at backup quarterback. But if they brought in somebody to I don't know, like an Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's not amazing, but he's also not a scrub. But they bring in somebody like that, maybe that gets him to take his game to that next level. Or maybe he's just like, I can't deal with the competition, and he breaks, and he's not your guy. But I think this is the year, man. At the end of this year, you're going to know for long term, is Daniel Jones going to be our quarterback for the next 10 years, or are we drafting a quarterback next year? I think this year is going to sum it up, barring some kind of catastrophic injury. For my record prediction, it was tough, man. I said I went 8-8 last year. I look at this team, and there's spots I really love. I love that defensive line. They have Dexter Lawrence. They have, BJ Hill. They have Williams. Like they have really an old school defensive line, like that 34 front. Something we've seen like the Baltimore Ravens run. Danny Shelton, like they almost have 2 nose tackles for their 2 of their 30 front. So I think it's interesting. They have some guys like, a Carter who can get after the quarterback. Their back end, dude, they have some mean dudes back there, man. Logan Ryan, Jabril Peppers, Bradbury's one of the best corners in the NFL. Dory Jackson, if he lives up to the hype. The offensive line, you're kind of hoping like a Will Hernandez kind of steps up. I liked him coming out, and I thought he was going to be a big piece for this Giants team. I believe his PFF grade last year was like a 58, a little below average. So, hopefully he can kind of, step up a little bit. That offensive line shores up a little bit. Daniel Jones takes care of the ball. And like I said, this team has the ability to win 11 games. I'm going to say they go 8-9. And I think it solely falls on they lose some close ones that maybe they shouldn't, that are 50-50 games. I think Daniel Jones gives away a few games. But I like this team moving forward. They're very complete. They're young. I like how they're starting to get things going the right way again. This feels like the early processes of when like Eli Manning came to town. It's not there yet, and Super Bowl's not going to be this year. Maybe playoffs isn't this year, but it's coming. This team being highly competitive is just around the corner. As far as bold prediction, it's going to go back to what I said about weaknesses and biggest question mark. I think after this year, the reason I said that their final record is going to be 8-9, I think this is the last year you see Daniel Jones be the guy. I'm not saying he's not going to be on the roster next year, but what I'm saying is he's not the future. And whether they, get somebody in the draft, whether they get somebody to be a short-term piece, Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be on the market next year. I have no idea what the future holds for them, but I do not think Daniel Jones is that guy. I appreciate you guys sticking around. Please drop in the comments what you guys think. I love to hear from you guys. That's the reason I do this, man. I like to talk sports. So drop in the comments. Do you think I'm right about Daniel Jones? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think I'm right about the prediction? Do you think I'm off? Do you think they go 14-3? Do you think they go 4-13? Drop in the comments. Let's talk about it. And guys, if you can support the show, if you liked it, if you stuck around this long, it'd mean a lot to me. Click that like button, click subscribe. It's the only way we can grow. Just hit, what is it, 1,600 subscribers. So we're getting there. But until next time. Hey guys, thank you so much for sticking around for the entire video. Thank you for supporting the show, clicking that like button, subscribing, comments, all that fun stuff. If you could just take one more second and check out Rep Sports, check out Raise Energy. They are partnered with this podcast. They are help supporting me. So if you go and check them out, it's the best tasting energy drink on the market. 100% guaranteed. They have supplements, protein, pre-workouts, recovery, all that stuff. If you guys check them out and you use promo code SportsMuse when checking out, you get 15% off of your order. And who doesn't like, some money off of their purchase? That's awesome. So definitely check them out. And like I said, it helps support me. It helps support them. So please check them out, guys. And thank you again so much for sticking around.